Spring is being coaxed out of farmland like a reticent child urged to kiss the coffin of her dead grandmother. Ditch fires feed the air hungry for the musty smell of old grass burning. Colts and lambs leap their lack of the weariness that clings like muddy manure to boots of those who have weathered the winter. Soiled remains of majestic drifts ice themselves tenaciously to the shade of culverts. The first farmers are in their fields with chisel plow, while their wives walk out buildings and groves of trees to assess what bitter winter tried to take with her as she went wailing like a banshee to her long-awaited death. This is a horrific piece of history. This is not the poem, but on August 15th, 1914, while Frank Lloyd Wright was in Chicago, his mistress, Mamah Borthwick, and 6 other guests at Taliesin were killed when a cook poured gasoline through the house, set it afire, and attacked the victims with a hatchet as they tried to escape. The poem is inspired not by that atrocity, but by this biographic detail about the way he prepared her grave. It's called Frank Lloyd Wright Buries His Love. His unwilling knees bend and he kneels in wet grass, pushing into the moist dirt of her grave, methodically, with precision, as if it were a drafting lesson, flowers that abound on the grounds of Taliesin, trillium, daisies, Queen Anne's lace, adorning her unmarked earthen crypt with colors of morning, the scent of fresh lilies. This is as frilly as the clean lines and pleasing proportions of his golden mien will ever get, and yet never does he Victorian a place with such fervor as when he presses her nasturtiums into the ground around where her face will rest. As he lines her grave with their garden in the rain, parallels and perpendiculars of his rectilinear world gone amok, pain spreads like a coffee stain, brown on the blue lines and angles of his mind. This is an ode to my favorite fruit. You might call it key lime, but if you've spent any time in Mexico or Latin America, you'll recognize it as limon. You will find it small and yellow-green, as if all sunlight and spring new foliage had been confined to one tiny space. Score it gently, and from a slight wound will emerge a velvet sombreroed mariachi troupe crooning Adios Mujer to the blare of at least 3 trumpets, while diminishing pairs of silver buttons all down their tight black pants clank themselves together like phantom castanets. Cut deeper, a citrus mist will clean the air and salt waves lap languidly against the side of your house. Don't be alarmed, it's limon. No one claimed it was an ordinary fruit. Exercise valor. Sever the 2 full halves where the souls of a people are coffered, as in a treasure box of Fabergé egg. Release ancestors into your kitchen. They know how much cilantro you are going to need. This next poem is a metaphor for the release of all attachment that make possible the easy transition to the other side. The Birdman's Release. One hot tropical afternoon, the Birdman walks to the shed where his wares are singing jungle music in handmade bamboo cages built to stack one upon another from floor to cielo. With palsied fingers, he fumbles to unlatch each diminutive door and stands erect as his bent spine allows, while airborne gems of quetzal blue, emerald, and ruby hover above him, twittering instructions for flight. All birds, once released, perch on his shoulders and arms, sink needle talons into the loose weave of his shabby muslin shirt, and flap fluorescent rainbows of synchronized wings, lifting him above the lean-to where they once confined each other. Wind plays the Andean flutes of his airy bones, and his slack skin flaps like prayer flags in a gentle breeze. Young men working in nearby fields glance up to see him coloring the clouds with his ascent. Some sensitive young men have no defense against the power of feminine beauty. This one is called In the Headlights. Her breasts flashed forward like headlights of a fast approaching truck, and he, the gentle buck, stood broadside in the highway, destined to be roadkill. This one was written for my uncle as he was on his deathbed, and I later found out, I was in Chicago, later found out that he had passed the next day. Litany for a Rancher. Bless this man who lies abed with so much riding on the way he dies. Bless his riding the range, his bronc riding, his riding it out, letting it ride, riding herd shot, riding herd on, riding roughshod over, and his sometimes riding the fence. Bless his fence building, fence fixing, his offense, defense, nonsense, and his sensitivity. Bless his camp tending, crop tending, pretending, his tenderness, tending sick lambs at night, his tending to park at the 10 Sleep bar, his being wrong and his being right. Bless his bull breeding, bull shitting, bull dogging, his shooting the bull, and his humble.
I lost it. I lost it.
Bless, are we still there? Bless his fishing, hunting, dogging the timber, sheepdog training, curses, blaring, pups birthing, nursing into dog days of his doggedly caring for sheep. Bless his lambing, docking, shearing, his mouthing out, his dressing out, and his being out of time. Bless all that husbanding, and his wife a lifetime at his side. Bless his siring 5 to carry on the line. Bless his dancing at the wagon wheel, his sheep wagon, covered wagon leading the train, his being on the wagon, and the wagging tails of his well-trained dogs. Bless his logging and cabin building, the muddy cab of his pickup truck, his wethers, ewes, his bucks, his cussing and his cussedness, his luck and his being down on it. After tending his land and tending to land on his feet, bless his recent forgetting, falling, recalling, calling out in the night, his victories, feats, defeats. Bless his wink for the nurse's assistant, his cursed insistence on peeing in the sink. Bless his branding cattle, branding sheep, rounding and rounding up, rough riding, rodeo riding, riding high, riding west into the sunset. Bless him. Well, I need to find out if we're still there. Okay, I guess we are. Still up? Okay. This is called A Perfect Dwelling. It is the fantasy of that wonderful place where everything is clean and sparse. It's called Perfect Dwelling, a place to live the grace of less is more, uplifted by the holy word, enough. And another place just next door to store the stuff. City. We can relate. City of curiosities. In that long ago year of our being on the move, in one faraway city of surprises, 3 curiosities seemed to pursue us, appearing repeatedly from the dark alleys of marginal life. An organ grinder with a monkey, an old man leading a dancing bear, and a blind, swarthy swallower of fire. We never asked questions then, the hows and whys of their daily lives. Where does one sleep in the streets with a surly black bear, always hot in that mangy coat and muzzle, weary of showing off for crowds of the unimpressed? At night, when they lie together under subtropic constellations, does he remove his fur like Rose Red's prince and spoon into the wrinkled flesh of his keeper? Or does he put aside his upright possibility to growl out the grisly fierceness of his blood? What is the in-house behavior of a monkey gone daft on too much carnival music? Does he still, in his organ-infested dreams, plan his escape back to jungle canopy? And what is the sensation of a man in darkness eating hot light? Are his innards charred like broiled sausage, and his poor, solitary heart aglow with luminous warmth? This one is called Between the Cracks. Because the earth is alive with desire, every crack in old concrete sprouts green, held back by the wall of asphalt we have lain between her and the sun. A woman becomes heartwood. Another magical realism. I don't know this person, maybe you do. She'd always lusted after trees as if she sensed the softness in her needed to couple with the grain of oak. As a girl, she climbed a lodgepole pine to see the sawmill and timber beyond the ridge. From that branch's vantage, she first saw foresters. Drawn to the scent of pitch on their skin, she tried bunking in with lumberjacks, then carpenters, carvers, an arborist, even the guy in the Christmas tree lot. And in the end, could not quell her longing. Then one empowered dusk, she found a magnificent hollow oak with gnarled limbs and a sizable hole at its first branching. Resolved to union that moon-washed midnight, she stripped on the grass, took the pins from her hair, and climbed to where she could lower herself into its vacant core. Scraped by its rough interior, she bled into its side. Touching soil, her toes grew deep down, and she felt sap surge in her like a kiss that lingers. Raising her arms into the branches like a bride putting on her gown, she smiled into the darkness as leaf buds formed on her fingers.
Wow.
I have to tell you that one of my stupidest moves was one time thinking that I should read that poem to a wood carver that Dan had bought me a gift. Read him the poem, and talk about deer in the headlights. There was this whoa, let me out of here expression on his face. Two-step. My parents met in Hartford, Connecticut during the war, and this is a poem in the genre of those imaginations of a child about the early lives of their parents. Two-step. Hartford, 43, the big band clubs swing with doomed youths, sucking nightlife into their wartime days, D-A-Z-E. He is another soldier on furlough who cuts in, out, as always, for a good time. She is a key punch operator at the Etna. She wears high platforms that pump music into the curve of her calves. She will confess to me, positioning Dr. Scholl's squashed donut pads over her corns, that her youthful vanity via those shoes ruined her dancing feet. He is a handsome cowboy who can dance. What chance does she have? He has two-stepped her out of the canteen and onto her porch cot. She is not, nor will she ever be, the only thing on his mind as he is on hers. The couch, white wicker with the weave frayed, sends reed shoots in odd directions, like vine tendrils feeling for something rooted to grab onto. The chenille spread draped across the back covers them from the night's chill, as my mother, with dark wavy hair and large coquettish eyes that contradict her prudish piety, trades the ruby of her wholeness for a pirate's chest of longing buried in wet sand of her aspirations. She has invited the future in, and it is hard and unresponsive as this cot, and yet expectant as she soon will be. They have not yet learned that charm does not discriminate among recipients. They do not know where the clarity of her flashing eyes will go when disappointment drops a dark scrim before them. They are 4 years and half a continent away from my birth. She carries my potency in a pouch in her side like a gold doubloon. My sister will join them soon. I am waiting until they are surrounded by wood, log cabin walls with pine forest outside. I cannot be enticed into city matter, even by his charm or the dark, flirty flash of her Irish eyes. Thank you. This is called Death by Poetry. It's even worse than Death by Chocolate. Death by Poetry. When they opened her up, she was riddled with alliterative lines. They didn't even try to transcribe, they just sewed her up again and sent her home. 3 months later, in the spring of the year, she died of poems, her body alive with them. Protest poems in her spleen, holy psalms of praise in folds of her brain's gray matter. Love lyrics pulsing residual rhythm through both oracles of her enlarged heart. Arteries clogged with blockage. Her lungs so cloudy with misted images, each breath must have been a labor. Her breast's hard as on the 3rd day when the milk comes in, engorged with poems she could not let down. Benign in situ syllables of haiku. Ruptured confessional poems spilling infectious mixed metaphor into her abdominal cavity. An ectopic poem that could not gestate, poised to burst the tube that stretched in holding in its will to life. Parasitic poems plagiarized and feeding on beneficent microbiome. One last magnificent poem, almost spoken, lodged in her throat like a piece of steak. Say only that she died of beauty undigested like rough rubies, and we need only read her death to be gifted of it all. The last poem celebrates the going on and the getting through it, which is probably something a lot of you are feeling this year, but I can't complain. After the last page. Life continues its bold unfolding on the morning of the next white page after the novel has ended, after the motives of past generations have twisted themselves like tubers into the actions of the protagonist, when violence has subsided in a denouement, past the hurting and the working through, beyond that flash of knowing in the last chapter, that notice of something enduring or strangely beautiful in the natural world. When attention has been called to the behavior of barnyard fowl beneath a V of wild geese, or the stance of a wet stallion on a ridge under an expanse of clearing sky. When everything that mattered is over, and everything ahead is too mundane to document, but the burdened heart is still not finished circulating crimson words. This is where the story starts. And that is where my reading ends. Thank you so much.
Okay. Wow. All right. Wow, marvelous reading, Maureen.
Yes, really rich imagery.
Yeah, we can just, before we just jump right into another poll, we can just chat for maybe a few minutes. Anybody have any quick feedback or anything like that?
I just want to say, Maureen, you took me all over the place. Life, death, before, on. I was, yeah, really rich material. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, your poems are so full of wonderful surprises and Language surprises, image surprises. It's just so many of these poems made me just say, wow.
I love that. We've heard about everything from peeing in the sink to the gut microbiome. My
What?
grandpa used to pee in the sink too.
Yeah. My uncle did. One thing that's really interesting about this process of going through and thinking what you would like to share out of a huge body of work is that you see repeated topics, and I had to be careful. Not everything. I think I forget what poet said, that poets or death is the reason people get out of bed in the morning, but a lot of death poems, but also a lot of realism. The ones that I like seem to do bizarre things like mating with a tree and stuff like that.
That was rather striking, the tree poem. Yeah, you have to, it's especially since you have such a large body of work, it must be a challenge to select from it. Yeah. How far back did you go, by the way?
Well, some of them are very young. Actually, I didn't do any recent stuff. The recent stuff is about the cabin, so many of them are very old.
Oh, they still sound fresh.
Yeah, they do.
Okay, well, we have another poet. Excuse me. I had my second shot yesterday, but I don't think that had anything to do with it. I have chronic postnasal drip. Yeah, I got my. I hope you're all getting vaccinated. I have my second one, and the only symptom I have is my arm's a little sore.
That's good.
Yeah, I've heard some people have stories, But anyway, yeah, if you'd all please, in the lower left corner, there's a little icon of a microphone, and it says mute. If you would mute that that would be a plus. That way, when the poet's speaking, you won't suddenly come on the screen. I'll read a bio of our next poet, Carol Cantor, another longtime member of the club. Okay. Oops, wrong one, sorry. My teleprompter is giving me a little bit of a hard time. Okay, here we go. Carol Cantor describes her poetry as accessible. She writes to communicate and be understood, first to and by herself, to unearth what she thinks or feels. When her writing happens to speak to others as well, it is especially gratifying. She takes as subjects everything from nature to art to mundane happenings and encounters. Carol's poetry has appeared in over 70 literary journals and anthologies. Atlantic Review gave her 3 International Merit Awards before publishing 3 others of her poems. Fishing Line Press published 2 of her chapbooks, Out of Southern Africa and Chronicle of Dog. Carol has paired her poems and with her husband Arnie studying photographs in 3 coffee table type books. The first, No Secret Where Elephants Walk, came out of travels in Africa. The second, Where the Sacred Dwells, Namaste, chronicles experiences from India, Nepal, and Bhutan. And the third, Where Forest Temples Whisper, hails from Southeast Asia. So I bring you Carol Cantor.
Okay. I don't know. Can you see me?
Yeah, I'm going to put you on speaker view,
Okay.
and then you should be seen.
Is that right?